Manchester United report fiscal year 2025. Q2 earnings. Sounds really boring. A lot of jargon in there. But look, we got to be covering this stuff. We got to be wise to the financials of the greatest club in the world because, you know, the Glazers saddled us with debt. The club's broke. We talk about it on the podcast all the time. And we got to dig into these results to understand where is United now? Why are we here? And then where are we going? INEOS has had a year, right? So this is a year look into INEOS and ultimately what they're doing. Tons of points to go through in the press release, tons of numbers. Obviously, United, the biggest point between this season, comparing this season to last season and quarter over quarter, you look at things year over year, is Manchester United is not in the Champions League. And what does that mean, sir? It means money. So with United not being in the Champions League, we're going to make less money as a club. And we have seen that. Look, revenue was down 12% year over year. That's around £227 million. And that's primarily due to not being in Champions League football. You know, obviously we could sell some more kits. You can offset that. But at the end of the day, revenue's down. It could be down more. We did make Europa League, so that actually helped us. And then INEOS cut costs. Employee costs are down 13% year over year. So you're starting to see INEOS's actions in the numbers, right? The employee benefits expense going down quarter over quarter, right? Here in Q2, you can see down 13%. And what this means for the club is revenue's down, costs down, and in Q2, we're actually break even. So the first sign that United is almost managing better on the expense side, as much as we cover how much he's cutting and penny pinching. Here in the Q2 financials, you're seeing that we do have an operating profit for the first time in a long time.
So you see the work that INEOS is doing. So it's like, it speaks to the legacy of the INEOS mess that they inherited, right? Like maybe the deal wasn't set up to set up the club for long-term success, but all of the debt that the Glazers burdened with the club, as well as the transfer fees that we owe for all the bust signings that we made. But like you said, lucked out in a big way with the FA Cup win. That was probably huge in helping this club where they would have been in a really tight cash pinch if we didn't get that additional revenue. But also, like you said, the cost cutting. And those cost cuttings are going to continue. And I imagine we'll realize even more gains because you'll move off the Casemiros, but they're also making big reductions in just the number of overall staff that is at Manchester United. They talked a lot about how we're overstaffed. It is a big club. It is bigger commercially in many ways, but United's in a bit of a precarious situation. You look at these finances, it's like we don't have a lot of wiggle room. We're in a tough spot, bottom half of the table, where we look like Europe is an outside shot only if we pull off one of the cups. So United's walking a tightrope. I mean, it is a mess. We've talked about it for years, and it's still a mess, and it's probably as much of a mess as ever been, mainly because the club is a fucking free fall on the field. The league has never been more intense, and I don't see some big pile of cash coming our way unless there's another sale, which might happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, but for me, you know, and you're digging in because it's funny because a lot of Twitter handles or journos post these kind of headlines, you know, this and that. You would think the financial results are like horrible. And then actually you dig into them and you're like, this is the first good thing I'm convinced INEOS has done.
Yeah.
If you look at just the cost cutting through the first half of fiscal year 2025, it's a 12% reduction in basically playing and non-playing employee costs. That represents almost annualized £44 million reduction in just payroll.
That's a shit ton.
And so it's truly incredible what they've done. And so that's good. But the issue really is the revenue side. Is that we got to get revenue growing. And right now, revenue is going to even decline more because we're not going to be anywhere near Europe. So this is the threat to INEOS is more the revenue than it is. Like they're doing the job they came to do on the cost cutting side. And we'll get to that in a second. But the fact that we actually broke even in Q2 is a great sign, a positive sign. And the fact that they're turning the ship around, I just wish they could do it with better PR. I think the optics of the cost cutting is bad. Doing it in multiple waves where there might never be an end is bad. I think you want to do cut hard once and clearly communicate it and like do it in a very somber way. I think INEOS is, instead of just cleaving off the arm, they're sawing it off slowly. And
that's a great.
But you're seeing the yeah, it's a lot of that. Okay, so now everyone's freaking out about, you know, the $40 million operating loss they're carrying in. Hey, they're losing money. Headlines. Operating loss is not cash flow. So for the financial nerds of the world, right, you're going to be looking at adjusted EBITDA is primarily what INEOS is going to be tracking, because that approximates how much money is coming in and out of the club on an adjusted basis. So the actual cash going out the door can be higher, but as you're trying to just monitor the health of the cash flow of the business and what it would be going forward, you'd look at your adjusted EBITDA number, which is around 94 million pounds for the first half of the year. It's still down 20%. 12% of that is due to the revenue, right? At the end of the day, probably a lot of contract amortization as well in there. But they're still operating with almost a 30% adjusted EBITDA margin, which is healthy. So from a financial perspective, an adjusted EBITDA perspective, the club is healthy. The issue comes down to cash. When it comes down to cash, like we had to pay out like an adjusted expense, you would say, hey, this doesn't count towards future EBITDA. It would be sort of the firing Ten Hag. That's a one-time write-off expense. Ashworth and Ten Hag cost us 14.5 million pounds. You saw like a lot of people freaking out online about that. And cash is tight, you know. Net cash flow outflows of 54 million in the quarter, burning cash, sir. Like without that 80 million that Sir Jim invested, like we'd probably be broke right now. We wouldn't be broke because if you look at the adjusted EBITDA figure, we just have to pay more to get more loans or an additional revolver. There's financial options for this club.
The Glazers not going to let it go bust.
But the credit card is getting more expensive. Like you're in a zone that's uncomfortable, but they're managing. And based on these financials, I'm actually like, this is the best thing I've seen from INEOS in a long time.
They're managing, but that's in Europa League. And if we don't have Europa League next season, we're going to be in a really tough position. They've made real progress on the cost side. I think they'll continue to make progress on the cost side. What they need to do is they need to figure out how to augment revenue without necessarily being completely tied to the success of the team, right? Like you have to find other ways to skin the cat. And that's either like, we got to get the stadium going because the stadium will drive sponsorship, right? They're going to sell the naming rights, unfortunately, but that's just the way it is. And other fucking events, like you do concerts, you do whatever, you do radio on ice. You know what I mean? Like there are other ways to just kind of push cash out of a stadium. It's just that the fact that that hasn't moved that much in a year is a little concerning. It kind of feels like they're waiting to see if they actually can pull it off, in the sense that like, all right, this investment might fail, our minority deal might fail, we might not even get a chance to build a stadium. So maybe they're dragging their feet. But what I'm getting at is like, we're in a precarious situation. They have cleaned things up. But what happens next year when we don't make Europe, which most likely will happen if we don't win the FA Cup or the Europa League?
Yeah, and so the reason why you focus on the operating profit and losses, that's where PSR comes in, right? So like you have like adjusted EBITDA of 94 million. That's good to the free cash flow side, but then you're like, oh, PSR is based on operating income loss, and that loss total is probably related to just understanding there are going to be non-cash expenses in that. It gets into real nerdy accounting stuff that no one wants to focus on. But okay, why should you care? You should care because INEOS cutting a lot of expenses, trimming a lot of fat, which this club needs. They're getting us right side up for PSR and planning for the future. And I think we've only seen phase 1 of INEOS, which is basically like sawing off the arm. We have yet to see phase 2, which you were alluding at, which is basically like revenue expansion, right? We've seen some CapEx into the training facilities. We've seen them spend some money in the transfer market, but really what's next to come is going to be probably stadium naming rights, probably stadium deal, probably more sponsorships. And like ultimately that is why Manchester United have brought in Mark Armstrong, who is coming from PSG, right? Mark Armstrong basically agreed to join Manchester United as a chief business officer. He came from PSG. He did the Jordan deal. He has experience from the NFL, NBA, commercial stuff. So when commercial revenue isn't growing, which you can track here, United's commercial revenue just not growing as much as other teams right now. You see the light blue line, City skyrocketing. Obviously, you win, is doing well. United has kind of been suffering, hasn't been growing as much as other clubs. We are the lowest line here in 2023. And so United need to turn on the revenue. And it's tough when you're 15th. Who wants to buy your kit when you're 15th? Who wants to like sign up? Do we want to get a new Jordan deal when you're 15th in the league? Probably not. So INEOS has to expand revenue growth while cutting costs, and you're going to start seeing us drop in profit to the bottom line. You're going to start seeing that impact transfers. You're going to start seeing that through the stadium deal and other sponsorships. So I think there's twofold, and we have yet to see the second shoe drop.
And that'll hopefully be a more positive element of the kind of INEOS rebuild, rebranding, if they can hopefully survive it and turn the corner, like you said. A lot would go from just better messaging. Like they have not been good at that. And for a guy who has so much money, who manages such a complicated company like INEOS, To come in at United, like you think they'd have some smart PR people that like messaging goes such a long way, especially in sports. Right? I hate to say it, like people kind of just eat red meat, fucking breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like you can give them red meat and like kind of position things in the right way, especially because this is a win. Because if the club hadn't kind of shaved off that $45 million, we would be in a tougher spot. And also, like if and when we miss Europe next year, it gives you a little bit more breathing room than if you had to carry that cost currently. So it's just like we're in a tough spot, but we have to kind of survive. And this is where a cup would be so meaningful. But also you can see why they didn't make more moves beyond Dogu in January, because like, I don't know if they needed to loan out Anthony, but after Ashworth and then bringing in
you're saving like
Ruben.
£2 million on Anthony. I would argue you keep him.
No, yeah, of course.
Because of the injury threat to Ahmad. But another great chart, just to give you an idea, is like Manchester United has so much staff. Like it's just a bloated organization, which is why we're carrying so much cost. I mean, at the end of the day, like selling commercial deals doesn't require like 3x the staff, right? It's like United's brand is worth more, so we should have more revenue, but our staff should be in line with other Premier League sides.
A
And
little
you can see
bigger,
here,
but not like this.
but like
this is way
look
bigger.
at our technical and coaching staff. It's like double what Arsenal's is.
Boy,
It's like,
that's
could you
crazy.
be like, it's not working.
Yeah, it's clearly not paying off on the
And
pitch.
if you look at our overall football staff, it's higher than the big six. So United we need to get leaner. And then we got to kind of grow commercial revenues. I hopefully think the stadium deal will be a catalyst on the commercial side. We're going to see what INEOS can come up with. But the big takeaway is United is making slow but steady financial progress. And INEOS is just absolutely bottling the PR. Like if you're going to come in and like make an organization more efficient, there's ways to do it, and being sensitive and caring about the people that you're letting go, or caring about the people that are going to continue on. But like the Barada email we got this week isn't a good sign of a place you'd want to work. Like a culture of like the CEO threatening employees from leaking and all this stuff. It just job cuts out of nowhere, everyone getting fired. It just going to kill morale around Old Trafford, and it does bleed into the dressing room. I do believe that this organization in its heyday, had everybody was in 100% around, not just the locker room, the chefs, the people in the ticket office. There was like a togetherness about Manchester United, and that is gone right now. And INEOS is a large part of that because they haven't done a good job communicating or managing the PR as it relates to sawing all these costs.
No, we're not a high functioning organization in any capacity. Beyond just the football, like beyond just what we see on the pitch, beyond the stadium leaking. It's just like this club is just a mess. It's a mess from top to bottom. It's going to take years to clean it up. This is helpful. This gives you more breathing room, right? Gives you more time to work with because you're not burning as much cash on a year-on-year basis. But we're still in a precarious position. We really need to end up in Europe next year through one of the cups. I don't know what's going to happen if we don't, but it's going to be lean years ahead for the foreseeable future. We have to just get used to that. It's like it's not going to be $200 million summers, I think, for a while.
Yeah, and a big shout out at the POS_007 on Twitter, Subprime Goals. Follow him. I interact with him online. He's doing all the modeling, putting together all the financials, which we can use and help educate the audience. I think all Manchester United fans should be educated. It's a public company. We see these results. We should go through them. It's interesting to see what INEOS is up to. But let us know, what do you think about INEOS so far? Do you like these results? Are they cutting too much? Are they doing it the wrong way? Let us know in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next Manchester United video.